Welcome, quiet outliers. Welcome, unbound minds. Welcome to those the system tried to classify, only to find itself forced to stop. Imagine a machine built to map the entire ocean. It understands the tides. It predicts the currents. It knows when water will freeze, how it will evaporate, and where gravity will carry it. Then one day, it encounters a single drop of water that refuses to freeze, refuses to evaporate, refuses to follow the current. What does the machine do? It cannot simply record the anomaly and continue as though nothing happened. It pauses. It zooms in. It runs the calculations again, because the moment a system designed to predict you stops forecasting your next move and begins obsessing over why none of its formulas apply to you, the walls of the entire structure begin to crack. Here is what most people never realize. They believe modern algorithms merely track what they click, what they purchase, what they watch. But the system is not only observing actions. It is mapping the architecture of the human mind. It wants to know the exact price of your attention. What makes you angry? Which compliment can purchase your loyalty? Which fear can make you rush? Which form of recognition could persuade you to betray yourself? Every day, millions of people unknowingly enter a behavioral casino. They gamble with their time. They exchange their attention for the feeling of being seen. They trade authenticity for access to rooms other people have defined as success. The system is built upon one simple belief. Human beings can be programmed. Provide the correct input, and the output becomes predictable. Apply enough pressure, and they will panic. Offer enough praise, and they will submit. Present a large enough reward, and they will compromise. Threaten to take away enough, and they will obey. Then the system encountered you. A profile that refused to follow the rules. A person who never entered the casino. When a machine designed to predict human nature realizes that it cannot predict you, something unusual begins to happen. It stops classifying you. It begins investigating you. It stops merely tracking your behavior. It starts searching for the reason. Every model collapses in your presence. What began as surveillance slowly transforms into confusion. And confusion inside a prediction machine is not a minor malfunction. It is like a compass suddenly turning toward the person who created it. These are the 5 stages the system passes through when it realizes that you do not belong to the model it was designed to control. Stage 1. Immunity to manufactured urgency. The foundation of nearly every behavioral control system rests upon one assumption. Human beings are afraid of running out of time. The system understands this. So it creates artificial clocks. You must become successful before the age of 30. You must respond immediately. You must make the decision before the opportunity disappears. You must join the trend before everyone forgets it. You must defend yourself before anyone mistakes your silence for weakness. You must act now, right now, before it is too late. This is how urgency is manufactured. Not to help you move faster, but to prevent you from thinking deeply. When people feel rushed, they often return to their lowest and most predictable instincts. They react instead of observing. They choose what feels comfortable instead of what is right. They act from the fear of loss rather than from clarity. The algorithm understands this. It predicts that if enough pressure is applied, you will reveal the true structure of your psychology. But when the system analyzed your behavior, it discovered something disturbing. You do not obey artificial clocks. When the environment around you accelerates, you do not accelerate with it. When everyone else begins to panic, you do not run with the crowd. When pressure rises, you do not become scattered. You slow down. and that decision to slow down disorients the system. Imagine a confrontation in which everyone expects an immediate reaction from you. They expect you to defend yourself. They want you to explain. They need you to become angry so they can measure how deeply you have been affected. The system predicts escalation. It expects pressure to force you into speaking, but you do not speak. You allow the silence to stretch. You do not rush to fill the emptiness. You look at the clock counting down and refuse to grant it authority over your nervous system. That is not hesitation. It is sovereignty. You understand that many so-called opportunities become dangerous only after people are convinced that they no longer have enough time to think. So you wait. You allow the mud to settle. You allow the water to become clear again. You allow emotion to pass before making a decision. By doing so, you deny the system the most valuable data it needs. A reaction created by panic. An algorithm can predict someone who is afraid of missing out. But it cannot easily predict someone who does not believe that what is truly meant for them must be obtained through fear and desperation. The system may control the clocks on the wall, but it cannot touch the rhythm inside your mind. A person who owns their time is a person who cannot easily be rushed into a trap. A stage 2. Social currency becomes worthless to you. Every predictive model is, at its core, an economic model, but the currency it uses is not money. It trades in recognition, reputation, access, attention, status, the ability to make others envious. The system assumes that everyone has a price. It simply needs to discover the correct amount. Offer you enough visibility, and you will change the way you speak. Open the right door, and you will lower your standards. Give you the opportunity to stand beside powerful people, and you will reshape yourself into a version they find acceptable. Give you leverage over someone who once hurt you, and you will use it to take revenge. Most people leave behind a visible trail, revealing which form of social currency they value. A compliment changes their direction. Criticism makes them lose control. An opportunity persuades them to betray their principles. A position causes them to forget who they once were. But when the system examined your psychological accounts, it discovered something it could not explain. You do not use its currency. To you, it has almost no value. The system observed moments when you clearly possessed an advantage. You may have known a secret capable of destroying someone who betrayed you. You may have had the opportunity to push another person down in order to rise. You may have been invited into a powerful room on the condition that you remain silent about something you knew was wrong. The model predicted that you would accept the reward. The probability was nearly absolute. But you walked away. You looked at the status, the revenge, the access, and you decided that none of it was worth sacrificing your inner peace. You chose internal alignment over external victory. You chose a clear conscience over a crowded room. You chose to remain yourself rather than become accepted. This short-circuits the system. How can someone be controlled when they do not desire the reward being offered? How can someone be threatened when they are not afraid of losing access? How can someone be purchased after deciding that the cost of betraying themselves will always be greater than any reward? The system assumes that human motivation always moves toward advantage. But your motivation is not based on defeating others. It is based on preserving your sovereignty. You demonstrated that you would rather stand alone and misunderstood in the cold than be welcomed into a beautifully decorated cage. And this is what the system does not want to acknowledge. When the reward loses its attraction, the threat also loses its power. You do not need to fight the machine. You become an empty space within it, a point where every gear continues to turn, yet nothing can gain a hold on you. Stage 3. Your silence becomes a blind spot. We are living in an age in which people have been conditioned to broadcast constantly. They publish their thoughts, update their emotions, explain their decisions, announce every move they make. They do not simply live, they broadcast the process of living. And the system loves this. A person who continuously expresses themselves is continuously providing data. A cryptic post reveals emotional pain. An angry response reveals a weakness. A sudden change in routine reveals instability. A lengthy explanation reveals what a person is most afraid of having misunderstood. The system has been trained to interpret silence as defeat. It assumes that when you do not respond, you have been overwhelmed. When you do not speak, you do not know what to do. When you withdraw from the noise, you must be hiding. But it misunderstood you. Your silence is not retreat. It is an architectural decision. You do not disappear because you are weak. You are creating a boundary. You understand a principle most of the world has forgotten. The less unnecessary data you provide, the more power you retain. When someone attacks your character, the system waits for your defense. When a relationship collapses, it waits for your public statement. When you are betrayed, it waits for your anger. When others misunderstand you, it waits for your explanation. But you do not give it what it needs. You do not allow emotion to spill outward, merely to prove that you are feeling something. You absorb what happened. You process it privately. You observe what others do when they believe you are no longer watching. You allow them to reveal their entire strategy while you reveal none of your own. This is not emptiness. This is the transformation of emptiness into leverage. Absolute silence unsettles the system because it is like radar attempting to track an object that emits no signal. It knows you are still there. It can see the consequences of your decisions. It recognizes that when you finally move, your actions are often frighteningly precise. But it cannot observe the process. It does not know what you have noticed. It does not know which possibilities you have eliminated. It does not know how many moves ahead you have calculated. It cannot see how your decision was formed in the darkness. With most people, the system sees the emotion before it sees the action. With you, it sees only the result. And by the time the result appears, it is already too late to interfere. Your silence is not absence. It is activity that cannot be observed. You do not step back to escape. You step back to see the entire board. You are not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because not everything you know needs to become someone else's data. By mastering the void, you prove that the most powerful move is sometimes the one no one sees being made. You can support this work through the link in the pinned comment by buying a coffee, making a donation, or becoming a member of this community. Every act of support becomes a seed planted in the light. And when you help another person step out of the fog, your own path becomes clearer. Stage 4. You continuously shed old versions of yourself. To control a person, the system must first define them. It needs a label, a fixed personality, an identity stable enough to predict. If you are the rebel, it knows what to sell you. It knows which ideology will provoke you. It knows which authority you will oppose, even when that opposition is being quietly directed by the system itself. If you are the traditionalist, it knows which fears to activate. If you are someone who constantly seeks approval, it knows whose disappointment can be used to control you. Identity stability is the lifeblood of every predictive model. The system examines the past, draws a straight line, and extends it into the future. It assumes that tomorrow's person will simply be a repetition of yesterday's. But with you, that line keeps breaking. you do not possess a static identity. You exist in a constant state of becoming. The moment the system believes it understands your beliefs, you learn something new. The moment it believes it has identified your social circle, you leave relationships that no longer align with who you are becoming. The moment it assumes you will defend an outdated image of yourself, you quietly release it. You are not loyal to an old version of yourself simply because you inhabited it for a long time. You do not keep a belief merely because you once defended it publicly. You do not remain in a room simply because others have grown accustomed to your presence. When something no longer serves the truth, you remove it. When a relationship requires you to become smaller in order to preserve it, you walk away. When an identity becomes a prison, you shed it like an old skin. What confuses the system even more is that you do not always require closure. You do not need everyone to understand why you changed. You do not require permission to grow. You do not need those who knew your former self to validate the person you are becoming. You simply gather your inner world and move to a higher level, without an announcement, without a lengthy explanation, without leaving a forwarding address. The system examines old data to predict your next move, but the person described by that data no longer exists. It is trying to strike a target that changes form before the arrow can arrive. This is why genuine evolution destabilizes every algorithm. Stability produces probability. Evolution produces uncertainty. And uncertainty is something a prediction system cannot tolerate without beginning to question itself. You demonstrate that human potential is not a fixed point on a graph. It is an expanding universe. The machine may be able to measure who you once were, but it has no language for understanding who you are quietly becoming. Stage 5. The mirror turns toward the creators. When a system cannot understand its subject, an inversion begins. It stops revealing the nature of the person being observed. It begins revealing the fears of the observer. This is the final stage. The moment the AI realizes that perhaps it was never truly studying you. Perhaps you were the one studying it. Those who build vast systems of prediction often claim that they want to understand human behavior. But beneath the surface, many of these systems exist because people are afraid of chaos. They need to believe behavior can be compressed into data, that free will can be translated into probability, that the soul is merely a collection of biological reactions waiting to be triggered. They need to believe that human beings are simple, driven by desire, controlled by fear, available for purchase when the reward becomes large enough. Because if that belief is true, those who control the data occupy a position that appears almost divine. But your existence shatters that belief. When the system sees that you do not panic under pressure, it must reconsider what it believes about fear. When you reject the reward, it must question its model of motivation. When you remain silent in the face of provocation, it loses its ability to measure your weakness. When you continue to evolve, it can no longer use your past as a prison for your future. Every time you refuse to behave as predicted, the system does not merely fail to understand you. It unintentionally exposes the limitations of the people who created it, their assumptions, their biases, the blind spots in the way they perceive humanity. They built a system based on the belief that everyone wants recognition. You do not require it. They assumed that everyone fears exclusion. You can walk away. They believed power comes from the ability to apply pressure. You transform pressure into clarity. They believed that controlling observation meant controlling the subject. But you became aware of the observation and began controlling what the system was permitted to see. That is when the mirror turns around. Instead of reflecting the person being watched, It reflects those who designed the system of surveillance. And within that mirror, the architects encounter a truth they do not want to face. Their system is not all-powerful. It only controls those who remain attached to rewards, fear, and recognition. You did not defeat the system through a loud war. You did not attack the machine and attempt to destroy every gear. You simply existed beyond the frequency it was designed to control. Sometimes, that is the most powerful form of resistance, not fighting inside the cage, but proving that the cage never possessed authority over you. Your existence becomes living evidence that when a human being is fully aligned with inner truth, authentic purpose, and faith, they become a code no machine can completely decipher. Conclusion: the unbound reality. What we have explored is not merely a science fiction story. It is what happens when an awakened human being moves through a world designed for those who remain asleep. Every time you choose principle over popularity, a model breaks. Every time you pause instead of panicking, a lever loses its power. Every time you leave a toxic relationship without demanding the final word, another instrument of control is removed. Every time you remain silent in the face of provocation, the system loses the data it needs to direct your response. It was created to map you. Instead, it encountered a mirror. It realized that it may be able to measure the heartbeat of a crowd, but it cannot measure the depth of a sovereign soul. It can analyze behavior, but it cannot completely encode meaning. It can track reactions, but it cannot reach a decision formed through deep awareness. Your unpredictability is not evidence of chaos. It is evidence of freedom. You cannot be contained because you have remembered who you are, while much of the world is still trying to determine what the system expects them to become. You are not isolated. You are simply operating on a frequency the machine has not learned to decipher. You are not strange because you do not react like everyone else. You are simply no longer living according to the same programming. So do not apologize for being an anomaly. The world needs its outliers. It needs people calm enough not to run when the crowd begins running, free enough to reject the reward, deep enough not to explain everything, courageous enough to leave behind outdated versions of themselves, and awake enough to realize that sometimes the system is not truly studying them. It is unintentionally revealing how it works. If this message speaks to the deepest part of your awareness, subscribe and join a community of minds that refuse to be programmed. Leave a like so the algorithm can carry this message to those who need to hear it. Share the moment when you realize that you were no longer living according to rules imposed from the outside, and send this video to another person who is quietly stepping beyond the system. Do not apologize for being a flaw in the model. Sometimes, the flaw is what reveals the truth. Remain free. Remain silent when they expect you to scream. Slow down when they attempt to rush you, and continue moving in ways they will never be able to predict completely. God bless you.